So thank you, John, for coming today, and I'll hand it over to you.
Good morning, everyone. Welcome to the Job with John program. Let's hear it for Sharon Mercurial, Council on Aging Director. That was a lot of commercials for the Job with John program, but they're all good, exciting things. So thank you for sharing and keeping everyone informed. In addition to Sharon, we have some other employees here that I want to make sure that people know. We have, from the police department, we have Detective Gower, Leo Gower, Beth Van Enberg, our licensed clinician. We have Penny Funioli, our Director of Health and Family Services. And I think that's it. We have other people that have helped out in many ways and volunteers on committees. So I think the staff are excellent. They're professional. They do a great job. And the volunteers that we have in this organization really take it to the next level. And we have great people helping out in different various things that we do in the community. So the Job with John program always starts off with a quick introduction of me. Has anyone not been to the program before? Any first-time attendees? Thank you for coming. Thank you. Thank you for coming. All right. So I always say a little bit about myself just to let people know who I am. I'm the town manager. I was hired on July 1st, 2018. So I've been here for a few years. It feels like yesterday that I started, and it's a great place to work. The people that work here are very professional, and I'm proud to be part of it. I live in Westford, which is right next door. I grew up in Attleboro, which is a great city. Hopefully you had a chance to visit. If not, go check it out. A lot going on there. I have 3 boys in middle school and elementary school that keep us really busy. My wife is a teacher in a nearby community, which is a hard job, and I appreciate what she does. So being the town manager, I get to do a little bit of everything every day. I was just at a select board meeting, which is one of the core responsibilities that I have, is to work with the select board, but I also work with folks like Sharon and the police department on things that they're working on every day. And so the town manager really is probably the best job you can have, because all the interesting things that happen in a community, I get to be involved in, and I get to help out with. And as you know, not just in this building, but in all the different facilities and amenities that we have in this community, there's a lot of services that the residents here have, and it's a great place to live and work. So I also then, after I talk about myself for a minute, I talk about what's happening in town. You may have heard there's a town meeting coming up. That's May 6th. Before that, there'll be a town election. That's April 30th. And before that, there'll be another special town meeting. That's April 17th, next Wednesday. So those are all things that hopefully you're aware of. I can talk more about them, all of them, and I'm happy to really take questions. I guess the other thing I would say is I give brief updates, but the bulk, the meat and potatoes of this session is questions from all of you. That's what makes this program. If you want to hear the things that I'm saying, you could just look at them on the website. This is an opportunity to hear from you and for me to answer questions to the best of my ability and try to engage with you all. So I'm excited about the newspaper. I've said before that having a local paper is a vital part of having local government. They're partners. I think they report on the good and the bad that happens in local government. I think here there's a lot more good. And I think not having a paper for the last few years, we've missed out a lot of really important news that residents just didn't get. So I'm excited to see what's happening with the new website. I checked it out. It looks awesome. Congratulations. And hopefully people will start to use it and learn from it, and it'll be a part of the community. ActonTV does a really nice job of pushing out information and providing cool programming, and they've helped us hold down the course until the newspaper came back. So very excited to see that. So we have some events. Patriots Day is Monday. Every year there are different events. Hopefully, I think the weather's going to be much nicer than today, so hopefully you'll be able to check those out. Later in the month, we have an Earth Day celebration at Narrow Park on the 26th. It's a collaboration with the library and the rec department and the Public Works, where they'll be planting a tree, giving out tree saplings, and doing some reading. So if you have children or grandchildren, they may want to go and participate in the story time there. That information about that will be on our website. We have So the biggest issue that people have been looking at, or there's two big issues that people have been talking a lot about, that we're hearing a lot about. One is the budget, which I'll certainly get into, and the other is the MBTA zoning. So those are two things that are going to be going to town meeting this year on May 6th. I'll start with the zoning because it's what we've been working on most frequently in the last week or two. The town actually has 4 zoning articles that are going to be proposed to voters at the town meeting on May 6th. One is related to car dealerships and where they could locate and provide some additional conditions that they need to meet. Another is to create a new zoning overlay on the Powder Mill corridor, which is the street down here, Route 62, to inspire the type of growth and uses that we want to see there. Another is the South Acton Village zoning, which is an overlay meant to improve the way things look in South Acton Village, and that was actually developed in concert with the MBTA zoning overlay, which many of you have heard. If you read the Boston Globe, there's a lot of coverage about the MBTA zoning. It's basically a mandate from the state that says, if you have a train station in your town, or if you live in a town that's adjacent to a train station, you need to create zoning overlays that allow for housing production. That's the easiest way to describe it. And then there's different requirements that are each community, depending on how big it is, and various other factors, has to follow. And they also said, if you don't comply with this new mandate, we're going to take away the grants that we give you. For some communities, that may not be a big deal. Some communities are too busy or don't need to get grants. This community, Acton, is very actively engaged in getting grants. We get, on average, $2 million a year in grants from the state, and we're always asking and seeking more, and it's something that, given the limited resources that we have as an organization, being able to supplement our capital needs and our program needs with grant funding has made us accomplish significant things that we wouldn't be able to do. Just last week, we opened the bridge. You know the bridge at Narrow Park that goes over the pond? That was falling apart, and we've been trying to get funding for it. Through a state partnership, we were able to get funding, get that done. And then, the River Street Dam, look at all the rain we've had this year. It's raining again today. If that dam was still up, I think we'd have some issues this year because of the rain that we had. Fortunately, through a partnership with the state, we were able to get more than, I think it was in total, if you look at the design money and the construction money, it was closer to $1.6 million that we received from the state to take that dam down, which was a huge, vital need that the community had that we weren't able to meet, well, that it made it easier to meet without having to use entirely taxpayer funds. So those are just two examples that you probably are familiar with of grants that we use every year to make things happen in town. Some people have said, oh, we don't need grants, they're just for the big developers. That's not true. The grants that we get are for us. We developed a climate action plan with the grant, and we help build sidewalks with grants, all things that people want, things that people ask us for, the grants help us get. So that's non-compliance, and that's the risk of non-compliance. There's a community called Milton, which is just outside of Boston. They passed the zoning bylaw, and then they changed, then they defeated it. And the Attorney General's office is actually suing the town of Milton. That's not a position that a community wants to be in my opinion. I certainly don't want to be. Never mind losing grants, now we're having to defend a lawsuit against the state. That's a pretty big step that was taken by the Attorney General, but it also signaled how serious that they are about this mandate. So I'm proud of the work that our community did to develop an MBTA zoning overlay. Our planning staff is excellent. The volunteer working group and all the people that went to sessions, I'm sure there were some here, I know there were some here, sessions where people put sticky notes on boards and said, I like this, I don't like that, and they had several iterations and iterations and iterations of the planning process to get to a point where even last week, they were still refining it, and now it's in a place that I think is very good. I'm proud of the work that they did. The select board voted to recommend it to town meeting. The planning board voted to recommend it to town meeting, and you all have a chance to decide on May 6th what you think about it. So that's the MBTA zoning. The other item is the budget. For the last several Java Withdrawn programs, I gave an update on the budget, starting back in September, where I said that we were looking at preliminary budget estimates, and it was appearing that based on preliminary estimates, the revenues that we were going to be receiving this year was not going to be enough to cover the expenses that we were planning for. Big cost drivers that we were aware of back then was health insurance, which actually went up 23%, which is an astounding increase to have to take on, and pension assessment, which went up 4 to 5 to 6% each of the last 3 or 4 years, which has really been a cost driver that has limited what we can do with other things. So cost drivers like health insurance and pension have taken the resources that we have for the budget every year and taken more of it away from core functions to have to pay for those big ticket items. Additionally, our school system, the regional school district, Acton Boxborough School District, they work with us to work on their budget every year and their revenues every year. But we also have the Minuteman School District, which is we're one of 8 or 9 towns that go to the new Minuteman High School, which is on the Lexington and Harvard line. It's a beautiful new school. The students that go there get a full college prep education, and they also get access to the latest technology and other trade type education. But because of this new school, our costs to Minuteman have increased double digits since the building was built. And so the first year, it was sticker shock. Wow, okay, it's a number that's not huge. So if it goes up 15%, it's unfortunate. It was a spike, but then it went up 20% and then 30. And then even now, I think it's down 10 or 15%. It really adds up. Every year, as you know, if you're familiar with Prop 2.5, Prop 2.5 basically says that a town is limited in what it could collect in revenue from property taxes by 2.5% plus new growth. So we figure that's around 3% every year. So if we have 3% available revenue every year to run the town and the school districts, the both of them, and we're getting increases in one of the districts of double digits, and then we're getting increases in fixed costs and large cost drivers like health insurance and pension, it just squeezes what we have available. So that was September. October, November, we kept working on the budget. And then this winter, it was determined that there was a need to go for an operational override, that the costs that we were considering were not going to be able to be met with the existing revenue structure. So the select board voted to put a override question on the ballot. And that was part of a process that we engaged in with the Acton Leadership Group. The Acton Leadership Group is school committee, Acton Boxborough Regional School Committee, Finance Committee, Select Board, and then administration folks like me. And we met every month to talk about different ways we could approach this. And in the end, that's what we came to, was that we needed to do an operational override to be able to deliver services next year to meet the expectations of the community. So the override amount is $6.6 million. It'll be on the ballot. So if you vote on April 30th at the junior high, there'll be a question at the bottom that says, do you support approving $6.6 million in additional tax revenue for town and school operations? And if people say yes, if a majority of people say yes, then the override will pass. If a majority of people say no, then the override will not pass. And at the following week at town meeting, we'll have to bring a budget forward depending on the results of that election. So if at the election people say yes, the A budget, which we're referring to as the budget that supports an override or that accounts for an override, would be brought to town meeting. If the ballot measure, people say no, we'll go to town meeting with a B budget. And there's been a lot of presentations over the last several months about what the differences are between the A and the B budgets. Hopefully you've been able to see some of those or look at the information that we have online. But generally, the A budget would give us next year level services. We still refine things. We made progress with our health insurance costs by going to a new provider. Please, there's additional seats over here if you'd like to sit down. Right over here next to Beth. Have a seat. Thank you for coming. So we changed our health insurance plans, which resulted in savings for us next year and going forward. We've also, fortunately, the debt our debt situation has improved. We had our AAA bond rating reaffirmed this winter, which is a big accomplishment. There are only about a dozen communities in the state that have a AAA bond rating, and we're one of them. And when we met with the rating agencies, they sat down with us and looked at all of our financials and said, yep, good, everything looks right. That's what we like, okay, good, no problem, reaffirmed. We're gonna tell the investor world that you're running things at a AAA rated fiscal accountability. So that was good news, and it got us really competitive rates for our interest. So when we borrowed recently, we got a rate of 2.72, which when was the last time you heard a number that low, right? So that's the benefit of the fiscal work that we do, and having the bond rating helped us with that. So those changes are in the A budget. Both the town and the school reduced things to meet the requests of the boards, the select board, the finance committee, the school committee. And so the A budget actually doesn't use the full 6.6 million. And that's a little bit confusing for people, and I'm here to help try to explain it, and I'll be here all morning if you have questions about it. But basically, what we're saying is we're asking for authorization for $6.6 million in new tax revenue. But the budgets that we're bringing, if that's approved, only use 5.4 million of that. That's confusing, right? I'm sorry, but that's the way that it's been laid out. And what that does is it allows us to keep that $1.2 million and not tax it until we need to. And what we're saying this year is we're not going to tax it this year. So even though we're asking you to vote on 6.6 million, the actual impact next year will be 5.4 million. And then in future years, the town, the leadership group, the select board, et cetera, will decide whether or not to use some of that additional tax levy. But at this point, the plan is to not use that next year. So other things about the B budget, we would reduce we reduce the services in every department in terms of the expense accounts. We would really knock those to bare minimum, which they're just above bare minimum right now. And so things that we do to react to constituent concerns, like if there's an issue with the sidewalk, we can hire someone to do an engineering study to see if we can figure out how to add things. Funding like that will not be there in the B budget. Staffing will be reduced in the B budget. We have been trying to add staffing. We have a new employee I wanted to mention, not a new employee, an experienced employee. Our fire chief, Anita Arnum, is here. Under her leadership, we're working to build the fire department back up. We've had some staffing changes, and she's doing a great job. One of the things that we're doing is adding an impact shift to help supplement our medical response during the day. The B budget would take a step back from that, and it would eliminate one of those impact positions, which would be a step back in those services. Other things in the B budget for the town side would be we reduce staffing hours at the libraries. There'd be less funding for things like election workers and things like that that all help the town work successfully. We'll be dialing back on those things. Part-time positions will be eliminated, and but I think there's a lot of things in the B budget for the school that they've been presenting that have real impacts on the educational offerings that they have, and hopefully you've had a chance to look at some of that on the website that they have and other information that they're putting forward. So that's the general difference between the A and the B budget. We'd also do less capital investment. We're planning to redo the Prospect Street intersection, which you may have driven through to get here. We're planning to redo that next year and do some other great road work and some other safety improvements for sidewalks. That will be taken out of the budget in the B budget scenario. So some definite changes and impacts to services that hopefully you're able to learn more about. I guess I would stop now because I think I have a feeling by the way that people are looking at me that a lot of the questions are going to be about the budgets. And I wanted to just take 5 minutes and introduce and have our former deputy and our current Fire Chief, Anita Arnum, say a few things about the exciting things that she's working on over at the fire department. Welcome, Chief Arnum.
There you go. Got to do both?
Yeah.
Okay. Good morning. How is everyone?
I'll bring it up close, too.
Happy to be here this morning and certainly can take any questions you have. We have some exciting things going on in the fire department. We have, as the town manager mentioned, we have a lot of staffing changes. We just interviewed probably, good 15 to 20 candidates, all young, eager folks looking to join the department. So you'll see a lot of new faces out there on our apparatus. We have some new toys, perhaps, that's going to help our EMS division and the ambulance as far as providing certain types of care that we may not have been able to have done before. Our EMS medical director out of Emerson Hospital is very supportive of new initiatives and new protocols that he's allowing us to utilize. And we have a very well experienced staff of paramedics. They do a fabulous job providing care out there in the streets. But if anyone has any questions I can answer on anything, I'm here to do that. Yes, sir.
All your employees are they trained with the codes that are involved with the fire department safety? Like NFPA, like National Fire Protection Agency, they have codes for everything. And last time I had my furnace replaced, and one of your guys came. He had no idea that there exists for oil furnace, and he signed it off. And it's the wrong place. The switches are in the wrong place. So when the building inspector came, I asked him, he said, no, that's the wrong place. He had it corrected. So do you train yours by the codes, or you just, they come?
All right, so we are...
I'll just repeat the
so
concept of the question.
He's asking about, he had a difficulty with somebody who signed a permit, I believe, in the wrong spot. We currently do not have a fire prevention dedicated officer. So right now that job responsibility is coming under our deputy fire chief. And the NFPA, which is National Fire Protection Association, has certain consensus standards, but the codes you're referring to are actually the Massachusetts state codes and things like that. And they change from time to time. They change. I'll give you the example of smoke detectors. There's probably about 8 or 10 different versions of smoke detector code you have to follow when you sell your home based on when your house was permitted and whether or not you've had any revisions to your home. So trying to keep up with all the code changes and things like that is very difficult, and that's why it would be helpful to have someone dedicated to that task so that they can be sent out to deal with and have some consistency across the board with everybody.
But
So.
it looks like you didn't send the right person. The person who came didn't understand. And I told him this is wrong.
We can follow up
Switch,
afterwards.
Kill switch is in the same room as the furnace. That is a no-no for anywhere. Right? But the guy signed off and took the $25 check and left.
All right, so we'll talk later, and I'll come and see what the problem was, find out who it was, and we'll make sure we certainly try to send the right people to go. But again, we don't have a dedicated person, and sometimes they're in a call. The right person is on a call, and we have to send somebody else. So, but I will address that matter with our staff. Thank you. Other questions? No questions for fire? There we go.
If the override fails, do you anticipate having to lay off anyone from the fire department, or is it going to be more like making full-time positions part-time and, scheduling staff for fewer hours, or cutting back on other areas that don't involve personnel?
So as the town manager mentioned, our only impact staffing-wise would be the loss of a impact shift position, which is not filled right now anyway. So it changes our plans slightly, but we don't anticipate losing any positions.
Great, thank you.
Yes, sir?
Nope.
Nope, changed his mind.
Waiting for John.
Waiting for John?
Yeah.
I'll turn it back over to John. Thank you.
Okay, so Chief Arnum is our fire chief for about a year. But when did you start with the department?
1989.
1989.
Wow.
That's a lot of service to the community. Thank you very much for your service. Okay, let's go to some questions. Yes, right here.
I just have a question. I understand that there is a website or something we can go to find out what our, if the override goes, what our tax increase on our particular house, and that we just plug in our house and we're told what the taxes will be. Is there such an animal?
Yes, so the question is there a way that a resident can figure out what the impact on their household would be from a property tax standpoint? And the answer to that question is yes. The assessor, our principal assessor, CJ Carroll, and the IT folks put together a calculator on our website where you could enter in your property value and plug it in, and then it'll tell you what the cost of the increases in tax would be next year. So to get to that is, if you go on the homepage, actonma.gov, and you scroll down a little bit, on the left-hand side there'll be a little town seal that you could click on, and that opens up all the budget information. And one of the links in there says property tax calculator. And I can show you on my phone after this exactly how to find it. And it should work on your phone. It should work on a regular computer too. And if you have any questions about it, reach out to the assessor's office or to my office, and we can help you with that. But thank you for asking that question. I should have mentioned that myself. Yes?
Question. People must have received this in the mail. The main thing is, we heard from the fire chief about the fire department. Some people have been asking me about this because it says reductions to staff in fire and police. Found out no firemen are going to be fired. What about the police? People are worried that police officers are going to be fired because that's what it sounds like from here.
Okay, so the question is about a flyer that Leo received in the mail talking about reductions in fire police. And by the way, you don't have to stand when you ask questions. I appreciate the formality. I just want to make sure everyone knows that it's not necessary, but I appreciate it just the same. I haven't seen that flyer, but to just clarify what the chief said is that we would not have to cut an existing person. We would still have to cut a position. The position of the impact shift is a position that we're trying to fill. As mentioned, we just interviewed 15 people yesterday, so hopefully we'll get some people on board. The problem with most departments, just as we do the work to hire people, we have people retire. So even though we're doing our best, like right now DPW is fully staffed for the first time in a long time. And I think there's some people who are going to retire soon, and we'll go right back to where we were. But the police department, they've had people retire or leave, and we're trying to hire. We can't hire fast enough. Same thing with fire. So what you just said, reductions in police and fire, the answer to that question is in the B budget, the licensed clinician, not Beth, the second licensed clinician would be reduced from full-time to part-time, which is a reduction in staffing. That's not a position that's filled either, but we're trying our hardest to fill it, and we're going to fill it, and we'll have to fill it as a part-time if the B budget goes forward. If the A budget goes forward, we fill as a full-time. With the fire department, we're adding the impact shift. We have the impact shift, and if the A budget passes, we'll continue to staff that and implement our plans to have better daytime coverage for medical emergencies. If the B budget goes forward, we will not have that additional staffing that's been approved that we're trying to fill. So it is a reduction in staffing in both fire and police if the B budget moves forward. Does that clarify?
People were confused. They thought people were going to get pink slips and be fired. So it's just you're not filling positions, but you're not firing anybody.
Right. I think we're not going to hire somebody until we know whether they're going to have a job this summer. But it's a position that we need. None of the positions that we have are positions that are just superfluous. But they're not just there for unknown reasons. These are positions that the department had to fight to get. The fire chief, she threw in a couple jabs about the fire prevention officer she's been asking for years. And it's something that she wants a fire prevention officer, so do I. Well, we can't fit it into the budget. We had to fight hard to get those impact shift personnel added to the budget because it's part of our plan to improve our services and maintain our services. So if we take away that position, even though someone doesn't get a pink slip, it's still reducing services that we're trying to provide to the community. So again, I didn't read the language on the flyer, but from what you said, it sounds to me like it's accurate. Yes, question in the back.
Yep, I have two questions. The pension assessment for the former town employees of 6%. Now, my husband worked for a private company, he has a pension. Nowhere were we ever allowed to go back and say, you know what, I think we need more money. I'm wondering why that pension assessment needs to be addressed at 6%.
Thank you. The question was about the pension assessment and why there's a 6% increase in the assessment, whereas in the private sector that doesn't necessarily happen. I think other things happen in the private sector which are worse than that, but that's besides the point. Until the fire chief was hired, before the mid-'80s, employees that worked for town and government didn't pay anything into their pension. It was part of the benefit structure that governments needed to attract people to work for local government, and they got really good health insurance, and they got a pension plan, and they didn't have to pay anything well, they had to pay a little bit for the health insurance and nothing for pension. In the late 80s, they changed it to you have to pay 5%. And then when I was hired in the early 2000s, you had to start paying 11%. And now all employees pay 11%. But there are people that are in the pension system that didn't contribute, not because they didn't want to, because they didn't have to. And so we need to make sure that we have enough money in the entire pension system, both to cover people that have retired since and the people that retired before they were contributing. And that's a finite number. I mean, we're going to pay off our debt by 2034. At that point, we're going up like this. We're going up like this. At that point, there'll be a dip back down. But we have to get there. We have to pay it off. We've been mandated by the state to pay it off by 2040. And our pension system, which is the Middlesex County Retirement System, has a plan in place to pay it off by 2030, 32 or 33. I can't remember exactly, but in any event, that's why. So we have to pay for all the pensions for the existing employees and the former employees. And once we get to that point in the mid-2030s, it'll be just the normal cost of pensions, which will still cost money. We'll still have to contribute as an employer to pensions. The 11% doesn't cover the full freight. So does that answer your question?
Yes.
Okay.
Definitely. I'll ask a question.
Yes.
The second question is about the residential taxes. And it's been pointed out in this form that I have here that 90% of their taxes are paid by the residents and only 10% by the businesses. And that's actually a two-part question. I moved here from a community in upstate New York, North Albany, Clifton Park, and they have a lot of restaurants, Target, all those things, big box stores. And every year we had a surplus of over $1 million. And we have very high taxes. We have excellent schools, very high taxes. But our amount to pay for taxes was reduced because of these other services that came in. So I'm wondering why the commercial people don't have to pay into that tax base as much as the residents do. And the second question, part of that question, is why there isn't a reduction from 65 and older, not based on income.
Okay, thank you. I'll try to repeat those questions. So Clifton Park, New York, which is a suburb of Albany, has a vibrant commercial district which contributes to the tax base. I would compare that to Burlington. Burlington has a ton of commercial activity.
It wasn't quite that big. It was only like 30.
But your question is why doesn't the commercial entities pay more than 10% into our operations? So I'll answer that question first, and then maybe you can remind me on the second one. The tax rate that commercial entities pay and residential entities pay are the same. They pay the same amount. It's based on their valuation. So they can use the same calculator, a commercial entity can use the same calculator that we talked about earlier to see how much their taxes will go up. So it's not a matter of them paying less. It's just a matter of what is in the community. The community only has 10% of its real estate being used for commercial and industrial purposes. And that's because of a lot of factors. This area was developed primarily for agricultural and then residential. There was industry in our industrial past, but over the last 50 years, it's been primarily residential. And our team in Town Hall and our Economic Development Committee and the Select Board and several other people have been working very hard in the last 5 years or so to try to inspire and incentivize and promote economic development. And I'm proud to say that even though you pointed out correctly that it's 90-10 split, this year was the first year since I've been here that the commercial sector grew a little bit more than the residential. Not a lot, but it grew a little bit more, which is a trend that we like, because since for the last 10 years, it's been trending the other direction. And I would like to say that's partly due to the work that we're doing. We're giving Julie Pierce, who's our Economic Development Director, and the Economic Development Committee have been very active with creating programs and collaborations, and Sparks Hockey, which is right next door. Businesses like that are booming here in Acton. WECO is a huge company that started here. A lot of things are happening that I think are trending in the right direction, and we're going to continue to do that. But in the end, there's only so much land, and most of it's residential. So we're going to do our best to try to continue to turn that from, make it 89-11 and try to inch back up. But I don't know that that's going to change significantly in the short term. But it's not a matter of them paying less. It's just a matter of them, there's less of it.
Well, there seems to be a lot of empty storefronts, and I know we're probably working on that to get businesses back in, and I know like where the Donald's Plaza is, 3 businesses have gone out of that plaza, and there's nobody, it's been years, and no one has come back in.
Yeah, so business, and we can move to other, well, I still have to answer your second question, but vacant storefronts is something that we've been focused on. We just did a profile piece on a vacant storefront that we successfully filled with a salt cave over on Acorn Plaza on Great Road. We actually, with town meeting support, we had a $10,000 incentive, which was matched even greater from the state incentives to get them to have a break on their first year, and it got them to come here. So that's a success story. We've had the TIF with Insulet. Insulet is a huge company. They make Omnipod, which is a very successful medical device technology. It's basically a patch that you can put on your arm or on your body, and it'll give you and monitor with your smartphone how your body is receiving insulin injections, and it's also being used potentially for other medications. That's up in Magog. The town invested in that. The select board, town meeting, said, we're going to support this. We want to have economic development. They came in with a $200 million headquarters that they built there, and I think that decision that was made by the town 5 years ago, I think helped swing the pendulum a little bit this year because it led to investment there. They bought the old Sea Change building and put 140,000 of mixed use, mixed storage space right there, big investment. So things are happening, and we want to keep that momentum. What was the second part of your question?
The 65 and older.
Oh, so we have and I meant to bring it with me. I'm sorry, I was rushing out the door. We have a really good program for tax relief. And it's not just for seniors, although a lot of the programs are focused on 65 and over. And I encourage you to check that out. We can give you a packet before you leave.
I know it's based on income. I'm just saying that, I guess that's my question, why isn't it just across the board? Why is it just based on income? Because even, 65 and older, no matter how much money you make, it's all in a fixed income. And that's just my observation.
So, some of the programs are not income-based. The deferment program, I believe, there's no income requirement. You can decide to defer for any reason. So,
40,000.
okay. Well, we have a member of the Board of Assessors in the room
Okay.
who can help you with that. And
Thank you.
We have, okay, sorry, any other questions? Oh, over here.
So I have a question about the proposed staffing cuts in the town budget and how the first cuts proposed are to public safety, but not to diversity, equity, inclusion, or sustainability positions, which also have positions in the schools, which would seem to be a duplication of functions. And do you think that maybe that should be reconsidered and if that doesn't align with the priorities of the community?
So the question is, why are there cuts focused in public safety when they could be in other areas such as diversity, equity, inclusion? And you mentioned that there's an office for that in the schools and the town. And you suggested that it's not aligned with the community's priorities. I would suggest that the diversity, equity, inclusion office is aligned with the community's priorities. It was a goal of the select board to create that position. And they're the ones who direct me on how to implement priorities. So I feel very much that it is within the priorities of the community. And I think to the school and the town one, the school is a pretty big organization, as you know, bigger than the town. And I think the needs that it has as it relates to that position, and I don't work with her every day, but my understanding is she's doing a lot of things with students and families and teachers and et cetera that our office doesn't do. And I think they're separate roles. And as far as I know, the one that we have in the town office, Wanjiko Gashohe, she's doing a really nice job bringing people together, bringing trainings forward, helping with reviewing policies and programming, and participating in every part of the government, which is what the study that was implemented asked the office to do. So as far as I know, as far as I can tell, and the feedback I've been getting is that it's a very successful program. So that is not something that, when asked to make cuts, that was not the first place I was going to go, because it's a program that's working well, it's successful, and there's only one person. So other departments have dozens of people, and if you cut one person, the program's gone. If you cut a half of a person in another department, the services continue. That was my justification. Thank you for the question. Yes?
I have a question about trucks on the road. Are big trucks like the 16-wheelers, are they allowed on all roads? I came across a 16-wheeler going down Piper Road, that big turn there, and it was really tough to get past. Are there any restrictions where the really big trucks can go?
The question was about trucks and tractor trailers, and are they allowed on every road? She mentioned Piper Road as a road that was a concern. So public roads are accepted roads that the town provides, and any vehicle can travel on them. There's no restriction on public roads unless a truck exclusion is actually adopted, which happens in some communities in some areas. I'm not aware of, maybe the police department, I don't know if you know of any truck exclusions in town. I can't think of any. I know in Tewksbury, I'm familiar with one. But, so it is something, it is a process that can be adopted to create a truck exclusion for a specific section of road, but there aren't any of those in Acton that I'm aware of. Thank you for the question. Yes?
At the meeting last night in the library and today, you stated that you first thought you needed 6.6 million, and now you realize you only need 5.4 million. Correct, restating your position. But the proposal is for the 6.6. It is my understanding, and I'm new in Massachusetts, that whatever increase in the budget this year, whether it's 2% or 6%, automatically rolls into the base. So next year's 2% is based on the total taxes this year. So if I understand it correctly, you don't need the 1.2 million, but if it passes, it will be added to the tax base, and next year's 2% will include that money.
So the question is about the 6.6 million and only using 5.4 of it, and his question is, doesn't that just add a total of 6.6 million to the base, regardless of how much we spend next year? And the answer to that question is yes. In the town budgeting process, every year we look at revenues, and then we look at expenses. And in some years, although not the last two, but in some years, when we look at revenues, we set aside funding for excess levy. And what that is money that we have the authority to tax, but we're choosing not to tax. And so a good way to bring that forward is the $1.2 million is untaxed levy, if it's approved. If the override's approved for 6.6 million, next year there'll be $1.2 million in untaxed levy. And that's aligned in the ALG plan, which if you don't look at it every day like I do, it may be hard to read, but I'm happy to walk through it with you after this. There's a line that says untaxed levy. So in the fiscal year 25 budget, that's in the warrant, and the ALG plan is going to be in the warrant. It's in the first 15 pages or so. It has a yellow column on it. You can find it once you get it next week in the mail. In the untaxed levy capacity, it says 1.2 million. That's how much we're not taxing. In the ALG plan for FY26, which is the following year, which speaks to your question, doesn't it add to the base the following year? The answer is yes. Right now, the ALG plan shows untaxed levy capacity next year of 800,000. So it acknowledges that there's a tentative plan to use some of that capacity next year, although it needs to be determined through the normal process. But as a placeholder, there's 800,000 still being left in untaxed levy capacity. And that number could go to 2 million, it could go to 0. But that is where we would be able to ask for authority to tax to additional 6.6 million, have it added to the base next year, but still not use it next year as a thoughtful plan to have a community ease into that revenue structure. So that is the current plan, is to not use it all this year and to not use it all next year.
But it'll still increase the tax levy in those years.
The tax levy meaning the amount, the denominator that we do the math off of, yes. And then the decision of whether to use it all is a local decision. So yeah, I mean, I answered that question to start with. I said yes. Yes. Yes.
Yeah, two questions. One by clarification, John. You used the date 2034 for a date when pension benefits would be caught up. Now, isn't 2034, it's a different group, it's called OPED, it's Other Post-Employee Retirement Benefits. That's separate and apart of the annual contributions the town makes to the Middlesex County Retirement Board. You get a bill for that every year, you pay that. That pension benefit doesn't end in 2034. That goes on out into the future. I think you confused it with what they call other post-employee retirement benefits. Those are for medical insurance premiums for retired staff. That's what we've been paying, I think, close to $1 million a year to catch that up, and the projection is that will be paid off in 2034. Is that correct?
They're both scheduled to be paid off in that time frame. So both the pension assessment catch-up and the unfunded OPEB liability have a point in the mid-2030s that they're going to ramp down.
And the pension continues to go on.
The normal cost of the pension assessment will continue, but we'll have caught up with the unfunded amount.
Okay, other question. The last time we had overrides in 2003 and 2005, both of which I supported and campaigned for, we had an increasing school enrollment. It was going up. For the last 15 years, enrollment's gone down about 1,000 K through 12. During that time, the superintendent and the school committee made a very conscious decision not to reduce staff commensurate with the enrollment drop, chose to have smaller classes throughout the system, and in fact added staff, both teachers from top to bottom, administrators in the central office, vice principals throughout the system, curriculum specialists, academic coaches. That's a hard one for a lot of people, to deal with. That's not the way it's been historically done. When my wife was a department chairman for 28 years in the high school, they would get, emails from Bill Ryan, our model showing we're going to have a drop of 50 students, cut a teacher, and the 5 department heads would get together and figure out what to do and make it work. That's been lost, and that's what troubles a lot of people in the face of declining enrollments, declining of 1,000. In the high school, since 2014, you've had a 16% drop. Why wasn't that dealt with responsibly and appropriate cuts made?
Thank you for the question. Just to reiterate, Mr. John Benson, former select board member, was on the board, said yes to me in April of about 6 or 7 years ago this month.
That was the first vote I made on.
Yeah, it was my favorite vote of yours. Mr. Benson's asking about the school department at the school district and the way that it managed the change in enrollment over the last 15 years. And that's something that, as I mentioned, my wife is a teacher. I work closely with the superintendent, but neither of those things make me qualified to answer that question necessarily. But I do know that the way that we educate students now is much different than it was 15 years ago, and the needs that they have, every single one of them, it seems, are different than they were when I was in school, and the way that the schools operated are different now. So I think that's a good question to ask them specifically, meaning the school committee or the superintendent, but I know that I've worked collaboratively with the superintendent. He started the same day as me, July 1st, 2018, and we've worked together to solve challenges every year. And so I think I could certainly ask him, or I'm sure you have.
No, I haven't.
But I think the way that, I can't speak to how.
It's a question that's out there, and I know he had lunch with, many of you remember Bill Ryan.
Yes.
And that was the first question he asked him when I went for an override. My enrollment was going up. Yours is going down. We kept a very close watch on enrollment news every few months. Is it dropping? Is it dropping? And we would make adjustments as we went on. My wife would get those calls. So, it's just a very different way of managing. It's choices that they've made to have smaller classes, to create a lot of support systems within the school. It is different now.
I mean, the support systems are not by choice. I mean, they're mandated, the schools are mandated by law to provide education services based on the needs of the students, and the needs of the students are very much different, and from my understanding, much more costly than they were 15 years ago. Regardless of the class size, I think the needs and the cost of educating students has increased. And I think this is a good topic to continue in another forum with more school folks there, but I appreciate the question and your support through the years. Yes?
I have a question and a comment. The first one has to do with the calculator for what your taxes are going to be. When CJ did the assessment form here, I think it was January, what he said was that this year's assessments get reevaluated every January. And this year's, your value is based on 2022 sales. And on January 1st, your value will be based on 2023 sales. So this calculator is only good for 6 months. And I know my community, our values for our homes that sold in 2023 were exponentially increased over what my assessed value is. So I'm looking I'm expecting a big increase in my assessment in January. So this calculator, while it's being touted, is that really reflective of what we're going to get? If CJ in the room over there said, come January, you're going to be reevaluated. So it's only good for 6 months.
Well, I would say that it hasn't been touted. I would say that it's been provided. You're right. The numbers and estimates are just estimates, and they always change. But our other choice is not provide any information, and I don't think that's a good choice. We're doing the best we can to provide the best estimates that we can to inform people about potential outcomes of the vote. So are there some assumptions in there? Yes. But I think we look at 7-year averages. We look at several other things, and we do the best we can to provide estimates. And it should say there several times, this is an estimate, this is an estimate, this is an estimate. And that's all it is. But I think it's better than saying, good luck, figure it out on your own. We're just doing our best here to give information, and I think it's a pretty good one.
Hey, John?
Yes.
Can I say something about that?
Yes.
The main thing is, some people think that their assessments go up so their taxes go up. But actually, if all houses move up the same amount, then your percent of the total levy is the same, so it does not impact that. If your house neighborhood goes up a lot more than other neighborhoods, then yes, you'll see the increase. Sorry.
So Leo was just explaining the art of assessing and how it's a complicated, it's math, but it's also an art, and I think that's a good explanation that when property values go up across the board, it actually has a different effect than you would think. So yes, a question over here.
My question is, does the town still have money from the American Rescue Plan? And if so, can any of that money be used to offset?
That's a great question. So the question was about the American Rescue Plan Act funding that the town received, and if there's any of that left. Yes, the town received $7 million from that federal program, and the select board allocated all $7 million of that, and the focus of the allocations was to be sure that the money that we were using, this one-time revenue source, the money that we were using was just for projects and programs that were of one-time nature, so that they wouldn't create a recurring need to have to find the money elsewhere. And so all of the investments were in projects and one-time programs. So at this point, we've spent about a little bit more than half of that, but all the projects are kind of in process. And so we expect to spend it all on projects and programs and not create any new operating expenses. We did just an hour ago with the select board talk about 2 projects that are needing to be revised and a potential way to reallocate them to another project. But those are, again, our capital investments, projects that wouldn't change the operating budget. And so it's a good suggestion, I think, and we've done our best to use that funding to offset the capital program, but it's not a source to fill gaps in operations, because then it would just perpetuate a gap in the future year that we'd have to find a way to pay for. But thank you for the question. Yes?
How does the approval for using the untaxed levy work? Who approves using it?
The question is, how does the approval for using the untaxed levy work? I mean, ultimately, it's town meeting. The town meeting approves the budget every year. And if the town meeting doesn't like the budget, they don't approve it. But how it gets to town meeting is the process I described earlier, which is I present a budget in December to the select board and the finance committee. The Acton leadership group look at the budget that I presented. They look at the budget that the school district presented. They look at the revenues available. They come to some consensus on how much revenues we should project for different things, such as reserve usage, how much the budget targets need to be revised, which this year they were revised several times. And as part of that discussion, they would look at untaxed levy and say, geez, we really want to keep untaxed levy in place because it's an important policy goal. And that would be the decision that they make at that level. And then
Was it obvious at town meeting that this was based on untaxed levy?
Well, it's hard to say it'd be obvious because it's pretty much it's in the weeds of the municipal finance, but I hope that today, talking about it will help further people's understanding of how it fits in. And I'd encourage you to look when you get your warrant. It's going to be mailed to your house, but it's also going to come to your, you can get it online. It'll be in color. You can zoom in on it. It might be easier to read online than the one you get at home. And each line describes the revenues that we're projecting. And that's how it's presented to the community, that this is the revenues, this is the revenue plan that we have, and this is how each line item works out. And so in that way, anyone that goes to town meeting would be able to see that. But it's also been presented throughout the process and discussed throughout the process, and I expect the same thing to happen. I mean, the ALG wants to meet again next month. I thought we'd get a break, but we're going to start already for next year, next month. So, other questions, comments, complaints? Yes.
Two questions for you. Number one is, I heard recently that most of the municipalities in the state have been given money to help them fight the addiction issue that we have. And I have to admit, I've not educated myself on how active is all that, so I'm wondering if you could speak to that. And they haven't spent it. Most of them haven't spent it, so that's number one. And my second question is, just if you could speak to the top 2 or 3 issues that concern you.
Oh, thank you. Those are good questions. So the first one was, the question was, there's an opioid settlement funds that municipalities, both the work of the Attorney General to reach a settlement with the big opioid suppliers and a few other lawsuits, have resulted in every community getting a small amount of money based on population and a few other metrics. Acton did receive funding. I think we have about $35,000 that we received recently, and we're expecting to get about that amount a few more times in the next few years. So it's a significant source of revenue that we're going to work with our Director of Family Services and other people at the police department to try to advance some programs and initiatives to help with the issues that have come from the opioid epidemic. Is it epidemic or a pandemic? I forget, epidemic. And that's varying. I mean, it's had effect on families, it's had effect on people, it's had effect on healthcare, it's had effect on employees. So that is an exciting program that we're going to roll out under Penny and the police department's leadership. It's not something that I see as a way to solve the budget, unfortunately, but it is something that I'm glad you raised, and it's important programming that we want to pursue this year. And then the second question was 3 things that I'm worried about or excited about?
Maybe both. How much time do you have?
I'm excited about town meeting. I think it's always, I say it's the purest form of democracy, and it's a venue where anyone that has an opinion can get to a mic and say how they feel about things. And every year, there's always something interesting and exciting that happens at town meeting. I'm of course hopeful for the things that we've advocated for to be supported, but I also just enjoy town meeting. It's our Super Bowl every year. It's a big occasion, and so that's an exciting thing that I'm looking forward to. You know, I was doing my annual report this year, which we have to do every year. It's our chance to write history. And I always do it at the last minute, and I always wish I spent more time on it because it's literally the only thing that I'm probably writing that people will look at in 100 years. So I should take more time for that next year. But in writing it, I realized that in addition to the fire chief and the Director of Family Services, almost every department head, we hired new department heads in every department last year almost. And I'm excited about that. I'm excited about the leadership that we have in this organization, the things that people want to do, whether it's the opioid funding that we're going to jump into and do, or some of the exciting things that the fire department is going to try to follow through on next year. The police department is engaged in, has a new chief, a new deputy chief, trying to continue to do more exciting things. So I'm excited. I'm looking forward to that and to see what these professionals are going to do next year, and I'm going to do my best to help them do it. Questions? Sorry, that was only 2. I'll get back to you on the other one.
The April 17th town
I think that was the intent. Sorry, I shouldn't have said that. So there's a special town meeting on April 17th, and that is it's to discuss a non-binding resolution to ask. It's phrased in a way that says we should ask leadership to conduct impact studies related to zoning proposals, or something to that effect. And so town meeting will convene that night. It will be run by the moderator, like it always is, and we'll have as many people. Hopefully, you all will be there. And at that meeting, the petitioners, which it was about 270 people that signed the petition, and there's always a lead sponsor. The lead sponsor will get up and will say why they believe this is an important thing for the town to approve, and the select board and others will say what their thoughts are on it, and then the moderator will call for a vote, and then we'll all go home. Which is part, I said before that I love town meeting, and it holds true. I guess I'm looking forward to this one too, because it is a chance to hear from the people and see what's on your mind and see how well we've been doing in getting our information out, because that's a pretty good barometer if people at town meeting are starting from the beginning and have little background information about the policy proposals that are before them. Then we need to do a better job throughout the year of communicating and educating the residents. So I think that'll be a good opportunity for us to see where we are with that. It being non-binding, it's simply asking the voters whether they think that something is a good idea. And then the select board, traditionally, at least in the last few years, has taken all non-binding petitions, all non-binding articles that get approved, and then they consider them in their goal-setting process, which they do every year, and they consider whether or not they want to invest time and resources into whatever the non-binding goal was. Because normally, or a lot of times, when you go to town meeting, you're asking to approve something, and it results in something. We're asking for, $300,000 for new SCBA equipment for the fire department to go into burning houses. If they say yes, we have $300,000 to buy that equipment. In this case, it's just asking what we think, or what you think. And then, in the end, it will give us that feedback, and then we'll move on and have the business of the regular town meeting a few weeks later. Does that answer your question?
So it's got nothing to do with the override?
It's not, it's got nothing to do with the override, certainly. It is going to cost us money, unfortunately.
That's my question.
The question is how much it costs to do a town meeting. I think, a regular town meeting where we have 3 rooms going and AV and all that equipment, it's more expensive than what I envision this to be. But it's still going to have to pay for police details and for room usage and for town council to be there for 5 hours or however long they're there. So we say $5,000 to $10,000, and I can give you the exact receipt afterwards, but call it $5,000 to $10,000. And we mail out to every household, which you probably received this week. Did people receive it? Yeah, so that costs, I think that costs $2,000 to $3,000 to mail that to every household. And that's included in the $5,000 to $10,000.
Thank you.
Yes?
2 quick things. One, there was a forum last night. Our town moderator had said that the budget will be discussed early on the first night. So please show up to town meeting. The second thing is, can you tell people when they can vote and where they can vote for the election?
Yes, so April 30th, the election, the annual town election is at April 30th at the RJ Gray. I think the polls are open from 7 to 8 or 8 to 8. 7? 7 to 8. You can also mail in voting, and there's information about that online. Does that answer your question? The town clerk's office is always the place to go for questions about voting.
Is there questions, or can they vote there? I thought I heard that.
No, I don't believe there's early voting for the annual election. So with presidential elections, you can actually go and vote at town clerk's office. I don't think you can do that for annual. Kind of, someone fact check me?
You can go sign up.
Sorry?
You can especially sign up for the April 30th vote. You can do it by mail. I just did this morning.
So the question, the clarification from the back, nice hat, I like that hat, is that you can apply for a mail-in ballot for the annual town election. And yes, that is true, you can. You can apply for a mail-in ballot for the annual town election if you can't come that day or if you don't want to come that day. That's still an option. There are deadlines for that which are coming up, which if I can follow up with you specifically if you have a specific question. I'm sorry, I have a lot of things that I keep in my head and I can't keep it all. But thank you for that question. Wait, we have a question from staff over there.
I do have a question.
Okay.
I didn't raise my hand, but my question is, so I understand that if the B budget is what we are ultimately we have to go with, that affects this year, this next fiscal year. What happens the next year? What happens the next year? How will it impact? Will you have to go back to the drawing board and do another override in a few years? Or do you, like, what would be the longer term?
Thanks, Penny, for that question. I really appreciate it. The question is, if the override doesn't pass, or if the budget doesn't pass, what happens? And would we need another override in the future? And I believe the answer to that question is yes. I think as we do our planning every year, we had sort of knowing in the back of our minds that the revenues are not lining up with expenses. And I personally thought we were going to need one next year. And so if this one fails, then I still think that will be the case. Because just the way that the expenses have grown and the revenues haven't, it just doesn't line up. So we either have to catch up or make some changes to how we do things. And that's sort of why we have a ballot question, and the people can decide which they prefer. Thank you. Yes?
At last night's meeting, they showed a chart of recent, I don't remember the last 20 years or exactly what, of the different overrides. And it showed, ironically, 2 years in a row that the overrides were defeated, excuse me. And the third year, the budget was balanced and they didn't need an override. And I know every year is different and all the situations are different, but I'm curious.
So the speaker on the right is referring to a meeting last night where they showed a chart. Who showed the chart?
There were 5, Leo,
It was basically finance committee, school committee, and the third one.
Okay. So, but to answer your question, I think it was a question. Was it a question? All right. Okay. Well, I can't speak to how things were done 20 years ago, but I'm happy to speak to how we're doing things now, and I'm very proud to do that. Okay. Anyone want to say anything else before we wrap up here? I appreciate you all coming and all of your attention and for being here. And thank you to ActonTV for broadcasting. I forgot we were on live TV. Hopefully we didn't say anything we regret. And thank you all and have a good weekend. See you later.